Welcome back to another great episode of Help. Nobody told me. I'm joined with my fellow host today, Jasmine Shapiro from Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. And I am Jordan Kagan, and I own the Man of Silver. So we have another great episode today. We are joined today by MaryGrace, who's with the Alzheimer's Association of Greater Chicago and Illinois
chapter, correct.
Yeah.
And one thing we see far too often, families have to make big decisions during a crisis.
Yeah.
And it could be a fall, it could be a health diagnosis, it could be so many things, and nobody's prepared for that. And all of a sudden, everything has to stop.
Yeah.
And you could be, in the middle of a travel, for work. You could be having young kids at home. I mean, everything has to stop, and now the focus goes to the crisis.
Yeah.
And I know that happens all the time, and it's horrible. And I think you are the program manager with Alzheimer's Association, and you provide education, resources, and support to families who are navigating all of this, right?
I do.
So tell us a little about yourself. How did you decide to get into this? You're young.
Yeah, that's a great question. I have always been in the nonprofit space, and Alzheimer's and dementia is something that, I think is near and dear to my life, and a lot of people have been impacted by the disease. And so I always wanted also to work for a larger nonprofit organization, and the Alzheimer's Association was just good timing.
That's amazing. So what do you do day to day?
Yeah, my day-to-day is really going to organizations, and it could be any type of organization, to talk about what the disease is, answer questions for caregivers, and just be a support to anyone, and regardless of their journey, or just people who want to know more information. I also manage the support groups in my territory, my area, so a lot of it is just getting resources to individuals, talking to people, providing resources, and volunteers as well.
So as you talk about being a resource in the disease, I had an aunt that was dear to me. She was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Had in-laws affected with Lewy body dementia. I have a very dear friend that was diagnosed with frontal temporal dementia, FTD, and that no one ever heard of, I think, almost until Bruce Willis was diagnosed. So are these all close enough with Alzheimer's that they are part of your organization, or these different conditions?
And your question is exactly what my question was.
Sorry.
No, I think that we all don't understand the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's and all these other, I don't know if they're offshoots or part of cognitive issues. So maybe you can enlighten us a little.
Yeah, absolutely. So dementia is an umbrella term for memory loss that's severe enough to impact someone's daily life. Alzheimer's is the most common form of dementia. 60 to 80% of all dementia cases are Alzheimer's disease, but at the Alzheimer's Association, we do cover all other forms of dementia. I always compare the term dementia to the term cancer because people know it. Like cancer, there are hundreds of forms of dementia. Like I said, Alzheimer's is the most common, Lewy body is common, frontal temporal. There's a lot of other forms associated. I'm going to strip this down to the most layman's term, so doctors might be whatever. But it really depends on the protein buildup that occurs in the brain. So with Alzheimer's disease, it's called beta amyloid. With other forms, it's just a different protein that builds up that causes plaques that creates blood loss or cell loss in the brain, tissue loss in the brain, and so it just depends on that protein buildup. But the reason why they get lumped into dementia is because a lot of the behaviors that you see, or the ways that it can manifest in people, are similar. So that could be the memory loss, different behavioral changes, executive functioning changes. A lot of those types of things people see are similar.
So
just to different degrees.
So for some of the battles, executive functioning at a young age, different things that the Alzheimer's Association promotes, brain games, brain activities, things to maybe slow down or counter these effects that you mentioned.
Yeah, there are the healthy habits for your brain, so the things that people can do to keep their cognition sharp. When it comes to the biology that happens in someone's brain with dementia, the biology starts occurring 20 years before someone even shows a symptom.
Really?
Yes.
20 years before?
Yeah, so we always tell people that when it comes to brain health, you want to start as early as you can. And a lot of that looks like increased exercise, being cognizant of diet, but then also staying socially and cognitively engaged. And that's more than just, playing some iPad games or doing things. It's really doing something that challenges yourself and makes your brain kind of have to stop and think critically. And so we think, crossword puzzles are great, but learning new skills or new games, like I always say, like mahjong or poker, chess, things like that, where they're strategy games and they change consistently and they really make you stop, critically think. Those are always really great to promote just, more blood going to your brain, more neuron pathways between brain cells to make it more nimble against disease.
So does it slow it down?
It can mitigate or reduce your risk. So there's a lot of things that can increase someone's risk for developing the disease, but there are also healthy habits you can do to help mitigate some of that risk. And a lot of that, if you can tell, sounds like heart health. And that's because heart health and brain health are very closely intertwined.
Sounds like heart, lungs, brain, if you're talking about increasing the oxygen flow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we always, it's good to remember that your brain is very intertwined with itself, particularly the heart and the brain connection. Every time your heart pumps, 25% of that blood goes to your brain. And so a lot of it's like, let's get blood to the brain. That's good. That's getting it the nutrients it needs, the vitamin, it's like everything that it needs is just getting blood to the brain.
So, I know you're not a neurologist.
Yeah, I am not.
So you haven't necessarily studied the human brain, but how about like oxygen, the hyperbaric chambers? Is there any studies that have been done that if you have better oxygen going to the brain that it might help? I've thought of that for years. Never.
Yeah. Well, I know oxygen is needed in the blood to go to the brain. That's some of the things that keeps your brain nourished. I don't know particularly how to answer that question, not a neurologist, but oxygen is very important because that's just one of the things that helps, your brain stay healthy.
So you said that the signs start like 20 years prior to actually being diagnosed?
The biology in the brain.
The biology.
So for Alzheimer's disease, the plaques and tangles, the protein buildups, they can occur pretty early before it becomes severe enough where people start to exhibit then like symptoms.
So when people start, I feel that I'm forgetful sometimes, right? There's so much that we have to keep track of. Mm-hmm. Passwords and, phone numbers. And thank goodness we have smartphones, right?
Yeah, very true.
But is it usually when people are older that these symptoms, kind of materialize, or?
They say on average the age or the threshold is 65 and older where people really will start to show signs and symptoms of Alzheimer's or dementia, but it can be done or it can happen earlier. That's called young onset. So it is more rare that that's occurring younger, but it's possible. But after the age of 65, it becomes much more prevalent, so that's kind of the threshold where doctors will really say the disease, you should really be cognizant of it and the warning signs of it as well.
That age 65, has it remained consistent the last 20 years, or is it going down?
I would say that it's pretty much remaining consistent, but we're seeing an increased prevalence in younger than 65. But that could be due to a lot of things. I know, traumatic brain injury or other reasons. But 65 is still, I think, the threshold that we stick to.
Okay.
Interesting. So you might say someone seems off.
Yeah.
But is it time to take action, or are you just monitoring?
Yeah, I think that when it comes to this disease, especially for caregivers, if something feels off, I tell families, start making records. Write things down. Write down date, time, what you notice. Be more aware of what happened before that, what happened after that, time of day. Because with this disease, a lot of it can be also pattern recognition. If you notice that things are changing, it's more than just losing your keys or losing your phone. Like we were saying, I'm chronically losing my phone. It's actually why I have an Apple Watch, because I can call it.
Right.
But it is when it's more than that. And so be cognizant of just writing things down, looking at patterns and seeing if, I'm noticing, at nighttime when it goes from day to night, or that, it's called sundowning in the Alzheimer's and dementia community. But when behaviors start to be a lot different during that time. Like, that is pretty significant.
And why
so,
is it that time that is called sundowning?
It's really just because when the light goes from being light out to being dark out, it can be really confusing for individuals. It can cause a lot of just like confusion.
Okay.
And that's where when people get confused, oftentimes behaviors will exhibit, which if you think about it, makes sense because it's their way of understanding what's going on. And so when just time change happens, it could be a very disorienting period.
Interesting.
And it's interesting because I asked this question to you because I had a friend and she kept asking me if I noticed changes in her husband.
That's a phenomena I think that is really interesting, where the person who has the disease are a lot less likely to notice changes around them.
Right.
And the people around them are the ones, their loved ones or their friends, their family are the ones who notice. And so that's another great thing that I tell people, not only writing it down, talk to others. Because if you notice something, there's a really good chance someone else has too.
And I didn't notice, but she kept asking me, like, did you notice, and like, they don't live in state, so I'm not around this person very often.
Yes.
But then the next time I would see them, she's like, yeah, did you notice? And did your husband notice? And I asked my husband, and we both said no. But we're not that close to it, so I don't know if that's why.
But I also would not mind flipping that around too, because I had a family member, as I mentioned earlier, who lived alone. And the kids weren't there every day.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things is when a family member maybe sees something every day, they are less likely to see something.
Or they're more likely to write it off.
But when you go into mom or dad's house or an aunt and uncle that you haven't seen in a year, it's Thanksgiving, it's Christmas, it's Easter, and all of a sudden it's the once a year you see them, and all of a sudden you see them pile of mail and bills stacked up. And this incredible disorganization you've never seen before.
Yeah, that's a lot more drastic. Yeah, absolutely. I think that in both cases, people who live alone and you go and see them less frequently, it might be more drastic of a difference. People who see them every day, it might be more subtle. But at the same time, they are the ones who see them every day, so they might be able to be more aware of this hasn't happened or this didn't happen 5 years ago. And so it can be either way.
But like, how do you know if it's like just aging, like normal aging, or if there's something really going on?
Yeah. So there are the 10 warning signs that we say for Alzheimer's and dementia, and I'm not going to go through all 10, but you can go online, they're posted. What I always say when it comes to Alzheimer's and dementia, it's really important to note that it's really when it starts to impact your life. So, for example, I'll use the phone one because that happens to me all the time. If you lose your phone, for example, you go into your house and you take your coat off, you go to the bathroom, you do all these things, and I'm like, I can't find my phone. Normally, someone can retrace their steps. Or they could say, okay, well, I know I came in, I know I grabbed water, I know I went to the bathroom. Somewhere in that route, my phone must be there. But someone with Alzheimer's or dementia, that will completely be gone. They won't be able to retrace their steps. They won't be able to recall what they did in the last 5 to 10 minutes. It will all be gone and it won't come back to them. And so that's really the difference when it comes to the disease. If you can retrace your steps, that's usually a really good sign.
That's interesting.
So I know I've seen studies where someone that was born 200 years ago, let's say, early part of America, the amount of stimuli they received over their entire lifetime is what each of us absorbs in a single day today.
Wow, that's crazy.
So with that being said, you talk about getting overwhelmed with life. What is life? What is getting older? What might be dementia? Do you have some suggestions other than maybe healthy habits, but some of the things, tools, ways of relaxing to say, okay, maybe some of these stimuli I'm going to try to shut off for a few minutes and just let my brain recharge? I'm guessing during the day that's helpful.
Yeah, I think very similarly. We have a lot in our heads, I feel like, all the time. When you lose something and you're like kind of nervous or you're panicking, or maybe something's happening, I just tell people, like, breathe. put everything down, give yourself 5 minutes to just like calm down, breathe. And oftentimes it's just because our brain is going a million miles per hour. When you allow yourself to really sit, calm down, and then think critically of what I was doing and where I was, that can be really helpful for a lot of people, particularly myself as well, because I think we're just going at such a fast pace, and I'm also thinking 10 steps ahead, or I'm thinking not right like next to me. So when you give yourself that space to just like not have external stimuli also coming at you, that usually allows your memories, your things, to your recall to come back.
And Shannon always laughs at me because I'm a list maker.
Yeah.
Because if I don't write it down, something else, I might get a phone call from a client, whatever, and then I forget.
Yeah.
And you writing lists too.
And I think it depends. I have two thoughts. That one, for me, it's on paper, but I better not lose my piece of paper.
Yeah.
If I'm in a studio, I'm not going to grab my phone and write it down. People have to find the tools that work for them.
Exactly.
And as you did talk about relaxing a little bit during the day, I still find fascinating the study from NASA, and I can't imagine what they spent on a typical study, but they did a study on naps.
Interesting.
And their magic number was a 26-minute nap.
Yeah.
So some people saying, oh, I can't nap, 'cause they might go to bed for an hour or two and then they can't sleep at night. But I do think with that little power nap, up to no more than a half an hour, gives our bad brain a chance, as you said, to relax, not to focus on something, and just recharge. Because as you said, when the day gets later in the day, I think you called it the dark hour or something like that.
The sundowning, when it turns from day to night.
I'm sure if we can relax and not be as exhausted later in the day, it might help too when the sun goes down.
Maybe, yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about when you have to make a decision that someone can't live at home anymore.
Yeah.
And, obviously if it's, a husband, wife, or kids with parent or something, but what happens if someone's all alone? When do you make all these determinations? When you have a family support or a caregiver, or if you have nobody?
That's a really good question, and it's difficult to answer because it's such a case-by-case basis, and it depends on the supports that you want to be able or you can provide. I think that some people have a lot of family that are close nearby that can take turns, and that person can live at home a lot longer. Some people, they may be more distant, and it might make sense for them to get additional support by either living in a community or providing home health or home, support in that way, or external, I guess. It depends on the person and the scenario. I don't think that there's unfortunately a one solution to everyone, but it really is about having conversations. And I think that oftentimes this is a very scary disease, and this is a disease that people tend to not talk about until they really realize something's wrong. And with that, I always say have these conversations early with your loved ones. It doesn't need to be scary, but talk to people what do you want your life to look like? Where do you want to end up? How do you want your assets to, where do you want your assets to go? How do you want it all to be handled? Right. Because if you don't have these conversations early enough and you wait until it's too late, you oftentimes are making guesses on what that person wants, because they might be in the part of the disease where they can't tell you what they want. Or, it might not be exactly what they really wanted when they were at their highest, cognition. And so I think that that's one thing, is just have those conversations early and pick people's brains. And you can have it for a couple of minutes, come back to it. It doesn't need to be this, intervention type style conversation. It could just be talking about life and talking about where you want things to go or what you want that to look like.
And there's a financial piece to that too.
Absolutely.
So whether you want to stay at home and you need to have outside caregivers come in.
It's expensive.
And that's expensive. Or if you have to go into
memory
care community, and that's really expensive. So if you're not planning for this, which
you're not, yeah.
I mean, this was kind of the point of this podcast, it's about life transitions. It's not just about when you are, senior, but it's life transitions in general. And so many times in life, you go to college, you get a job, you start working, you want to buy your first place, whether it's a condo or a house, you have kids, you're balancing all of this, and nowhere do you ever think what happens when I'm older?
Yes, and I think this is a conversation that can be uncomfortable sometimes because as you age, people don't want to talk about what that might look like, but I think that is even more important than to have those conversations.
It really is, and we've worked with so many people who haven't planned, and then they are in crisis, and they're calling us to sell their home because they need the funds from their house to pay for, the next place.
I had last Friday, someone had to sell a flat we're set to pay for a funeral that
That's
afternoon.
hard. Yeah.
So yes, these are conversations
Yeah.
too often people don't want to have. They're having kids later in life, so they're a parent with parents that might not
Are
want to
aging.
talk about this or haven't updated wills. Do you see certain demographics, you think, that are less likely to have these conversations? Where it's
do.
like more, even with this much more important for us to try to reach out to these communities to have these conversations that have been avoided.
Yes, I think that there are demographics of people that are impacted more by this disease. So African Americans are 2 times more likely to develop
Really?
the disease compared to white Americans. Hispanic Americans are 1.5 times more likely.
Wow, I didn't know.
And I think that in some of these cultures as well, including Asian American, there's still that really intense stigma because of family dynamics potentially, or because of just cultural reasons, where people don't want to have these conversations because they want to be able to take care of it all at home, and they want to say like, oh, I can take care of my loved ones, I don't need to air out dirty laundry or whatever it might be. And I think all of that is very understandable, but still that doesn't mean internally you shouldn't have those conversations with your family, because then you're making guesses. And you said too, or I think you maybe said, talks about will. I think power of attorney goes into that as well. Those are really important conversations to have, because if you are coming into this with a crisis, on the other hand, it's going to be much harder for you to get things done, and it's going to be a lot more emotional as well.
Sure.
But yeah, there definitely are a lot of different aspects to this. And I think regardless of demographic or culture, I think it depends on the family too, and how often they have these conversations. The more you have conversations, the more normalized it can be, and the more, and I think having conversations like this publicly is important too, because you want to let people know sometimes that there's a lot of things in life that can happen, but you just want to be prepared for whatever is ahead.
Thank you. And these conversations, I think, can't start too early.
Right.
I know an estate planning attorney that I think the world of, and she's under 30, and one thing I've heard her say over and over and over again is about medical power of attorney. Because she says your 18-year-old kid that graduates high school and drives to college and has life in college, God forbid your 18-year-old has an emergency and they're in the hospital without a medical power of attorney, that doctor, that hospital cannot talk to you about this situation.
Yeah.
So the medical power of attorney, when we think of dementia, we might be thinking people 65 plus, but these conversations can't start too early.
That's so true, Jordan. Yeah, and we've had estate planners on that have told us that.
Well, and property as well, power of attorney for property. I think that's finances and assets and everything else, but if you don't make those decisions, or they're not vetted very well by an attorney, and of course there's always loopholes and things like that as well, but you're leaving a lot of money or property in someone's hands that either maybe aren't able to make those decisions, or you just don't know.
You never hear the conversation to know
Exactly.
how they want to make the
Or you have to go, unfortunately, sometimes the route, because when, let's say, for example, you're starting to show signs of Alzheimer's, dementia, and you're trying to get power of attorney figured out because you're we need to get this done, oftentimes lawyers will be like, well, we can't let them sign it off to you because they're not of sound mind. And then you have to go the route of guardianship, which is very expensive. And so that's why having these conversations, getting this paperwork done early can be a big blessing for a lot of people, because you don't have to go the hard route.
I don't think anybody thinks about that.
No, we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to talk about getting older, losing our mind, and death. And I'm glad that last comment you just said, because you beat me to that. One of the questions was, it's not just the conversations, but it's putting it in writing.
Yes.
Making it
Yeah.
legal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Having a conversation, either the difficult one or about our past. Like we had an amazing guest named Dan Gelfon, and I think it's one of the reasons I love this podcast, Help Nobody Told Me. We're learning about different people, and like Dan Gelfon interviews people.
Yeah.
And sometimes maybe, he's talking about people's history and their legacy and family stories, but I think even sometimes recording people's wishes.
Right.
Not just legally and in writing, but having some of these conversations recorded can help eliminate confusion in the future.
Very true. All right, let's talk about caregivers, because that's a huge responsibility when you're a caregiver for someone who is having some memory loss. And what are signs of burnout for a caregiver?
Yeah, for caregivers, I think burnout can look like a lot of different things. It could be exhaustion, it could be denial, right? Of they're not gonna they're not gonna get worse. It's gonna get better, or it could be a lot of physical manifestations, right? I think that people could just be very anxious, depressed. It could be not sleeping well. There's a lot of different ways of just burnout, of being overly stressed out. This is a really difficult caregiving role. I mean, all caregiving roles are very difficult, but this disease, it has so many different ways it can manifest, and it can change with the progression of the disease. So this is a progressive disease. It will start somewhere and eventually get worse, and with that progression, your symptoms can change as well. And so for a caregiver, it's a new day every day. And, another big symptom of this disease is also insomnia. And so imagine you're being a caregiver 24/7, or you're being a caregiver on a flipped schedule. It could just be very difficult. So we tell people, be aware of signs of anxiety, depression, physical manifestations, obviously making sure you're sleeping well. Because if you can't take care of yourself as a caregiver, you're not going to be able to take care of your loved one. Like, it's the whole, glass analogy. If your glass isn't full, how are you going to be able to fill up someone else?
Does your organization have anything for caregivers, like support groups, respite, or things like that?
We definitely do support groups. That's one of the things that I help manage as well. Support groups are really great because I think it just allows caregivers to be in a space together and talk through situations that they may be experiencing similarly, or just to know that other people are going through the same thing as they are. So we have support groups, we have care consultations. I can talk about this a little bit more later, but we do have a helpline that's 24/7 in 200 languages that can do care consultations. There's a lot of resources and things that caregivers can tap into, and things on our website and whatnot that can be helpful.
And we'll put that all in our show notes, your contact information, your website, so that people can get the help that they need.
But definitely for caregivers, be aware of signs of burnout, signs of stress. Make sure you're taking breaks. It's okay, to take a couple hours to yourself, because it could be a very difficult journey.
And before we finish,
let's do our lightning round.
In a sec. Yes, one quick thing. You talk about caregiving, financially balancing work and everything else.
Yeah.
Is there a new law in Illinois where caregivers can actually get paid for being a caregiver?
There is. I wish I should know this more, but
It's
there
new.
is. It is new. There are ways that caregivers, they have to be through like a certain financial threshold. There's a couple of stipulations, but they're able to get paid for being a caregiver for their loved one.
I don't think a lot of people know that.
Yeah,
And
definitely something to look into.
Thank you. Lightning rod.
All right,
Go.
we're going to do the lightning round.
Okay.
So don't overthink this, just whatever comes to mind.
Okay.
One early sign people dismiss too often.
When people become very descriptive, I think that this is something that happens. People lose the ability to remember the terms for certain things, so they become very descriptive. They'll say, "Oh, over there where I cook," where they mean kitchen, but they're saying that because they can't remember the term, and I think that's very easily lost. People oftentimes don't recognize that because they're like, "Oh, they're just a storyteller today," but it might not be that case if it, goes for a very long duration.
Biggest mistakes families make.
I think definitely not having conversations early enough. And I think another big one is once you turn the age 65, it's covered through Medicare to have a mini cognitive assessment done. You have to ask for it. But I tell people, if you don't think you have any signs of cognitive decline, still do it because it establishes a baseline.
Who do you ask?
Your doctor,
physician?
your primary care provider.
Okay, interesting.
one conversation every family should have sooner?
Ooh, what you want your life to look like, especially where you want, finances to go. I think that's a big one.
And stay at home longer versus move sooner.
That's very personal. I think that it depends on your resources. It depends on, what you think would be the best types of support, how close caregivers are. I think that is just a very individual question. But I think it could go well both ways.
And I will add too with that one, there are continual care communities.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have two, like a husband and wife that want to live together, they
Yes.
think living in their home is not appropriate anymore, they can still potentially live under the same roof
Mm-hmm.
or,
Yeah.
have the ability of transitioning.
Great point, Jordan. Yeah. All right, and one resource everyone should know about.
I definitely think our helpline. Like I said, we have a 24/7 helpline, 200 languages. They have master level clinicians available. They can do care consultations where they just listen to what you're going through, get you resources. They're really amazing. I've used them for, myself, and I think that it doesn't hurt to call them. They can at least get you the next place to go.
And we will definitely include that in our show notes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mary
Yeah. Of
course. It
Grace,
was
for
great being
joining
here.
us and allowing us to have a conversation today here and with our guests. And please share our podcast. Use it as a resource, because the more that people can have these conversations and learn, the better off I think we will all be.
Yep. And please tune in next week for another episode of
Help, Nobody Told Me.